So a few days ago, I recorded a video where I went over my predictions for BlizzCon, specifically when it comes to the Diablo franchise and Diablo 4 even more specifically, because Season 15 was going to be launching on September 15th, which is 2 days after BlizzCon. That is very clearly intentional for something that's coming with Season 15 to be that close to BlizzCon. We're pretty clearly going to get some pretty big reveals there outside of Season 15. And as I was editing that video, they released the patch notes and the blog post for the Season 15 PTR, where in it they say a note on the 3.2.0 PTR, which is the PTR for Season 15. This PTR may have a different offering of features than you're used to, and that's by design. We have a more to share at BlizzCon, and we didn't want all this coming with Season 15 to be available before we got a chance to talk about it. BlizzCon awaits. So right there, they're just directly coming out and saying it now that there is a ton of additional stuff coming at BlizzCon. They also have a little bit of a hint at the bottom of the post where it says, "Through the dawn may signal a respite from the night. There are powers that make the dawn seem a burning inferno." So any of the lore experts out there can try to decipher that one, seemingly kind of teasing at what's coming, probably with the next expansion, but potentially even with Season 15. And then also one of the members of the community team on Diablo 4 responded to someone on the D4 Reddit saying, "We mentioned it briefly in the blog, but this is definitely a smaller selection of stuff from this season for the PTR, and not the whole package. More to come at BlizzCon." So they released quite a bit of stuff coming with Season 15, some new content, some new borrowed power systems, these new challenge dungeons with really difficult bosses, these open world difficult ambush encounters, legacy uniques, a pretty big change to the mythic unique system, mythic charms being added into the game, new unique charms coming, the rebirth system, some new Heraldric post mailbox that we don't know what it's going to be used for really. That's probably going to be tied with what's revealed at BlizzCon. So all of this and the reveal that they're finally just telling us that a bunch of new stuff is coming at BlizzCon, I had to completely re-record this video, and that's what this video is going to be. So in this video, I also want to go over how fast we've been getting our most recent handful of Diablo 4 seasons, because they're significantly faster than you probably think. I also want to compare this to its biggest competitor in the ARPG space, which is Path of Exile 2, because a bunch of the most annoying people online have been kind of comparing these two without actually going and looking at the information for how many seasons we've actually gotten of D4 pretty recently. And when I originally recorded this video, I also went over how Season 14 went with the Mythic system being introduced and all the changes coming to it. But since the Season 15 PTR has a bunch of stuff on how they're kind of overhauling the Mythic system again, just go watch my previous video that does an overview of the stuff we know of that's coming with Season 15. There's obviously a bunch more at BlizzCon, but go watch that previous video because that will go over all that stuff. So that means we can go into just how quickly we've been getting this last handful of Diablo 4 seasons. Now, as I mentioned, I want to directly compare this to Path of Exile 2. So Path of Exile 2's most recent update is 0.5, which has been seen as quite a large update, and I think generally seen pretty positively, seemed to have a pretty big focus on overhauling their endgame. Now, between 0.4, their last major update, and 0.5, it was 168 days, so about 6 months. Now, in our last handful of seasons going into Season 15, there will be about 188 days in everything I'm about to go over. So starting with Season 12 of Diablo 4, the Season of Slaughter, this season launched on March 11th and ended on April 28th, a 48-day season, which is basically half. Keep in mind, the developers of Diablo 4 over its history have said they want a new season every 3 months, so having a half a season is pretty crazy. This one does make sense. It's just a circumstance of when these seasons are launching, because the Lord of Hatred expansion was pretty soon after this, so they needed to cut that season pretty short. So Season 13, the Season of Reckoning, which came with the Lord of Hatred expansion, started on April 28th, ended on June 30th, so 63 days. So we went from a half duration season to a 2/3 2/3 of a duration season. Then going into season 14, the Death Awakening season, which is our current season, it started on June 30th and it's going to end on September 15th. This will be a 77-day season. So again, still significantly shorter than the 90-day seasons we should have. Then season 15 will launch on September 15th, 2 days after BlizzCon. Hopefully, season 15 is 90 days. So all of what I just went over, starting season 12, playing through it, starting season 13 and the Lord of Hatred expansion, playing through that, starting season 14, playing through that, and then starting season 15 will be 188 days. So about 20 days more than the duration between Path of Exile 2's 0.4 and 0.5 update. Now the main reason I wanted to do that comparison is because so many people have been talking about Diablo 4 just getting nothing with their updates and directly comparing it to Path of Exile 2 or other ARPGs, and not realizing that we have just been getting seasons absurdly fast, and in my opinion, way too fast. Not because we're like overwhelmed with constantly resetting, but because they haven't been able to make a really large, cohesive season. Now, Lord of Hatred, we got that because it was an expansion, but going into Season of Slaughter, it felt like a shorter season. It felt like there wasn't as much in it because it was a shorter season. Then Season 14, that's also going to be short and came after 2 super short seasons, also feels pretty small compared to what a normal season should. So even though when looking at the overall time frame of these periods, we're still getting a lot of stuff in Diablo 4, but in my opinion, they should really go back to almost every season being around 90 days, because now after these seasons, if you average out the time of a Diablo 4 season, it's like 82 days, which is quite a bit faster than the 90 days or the 3-month seasons we really should be getting. And because after Lord of Hatred, the base foundation of the game is just so good now, they should really go back to 90-day seasons and give us much bigger seasons that allow them to do just different stuff. Because one of my biggest criticisms going from season 13 to 14 is just that it felt so samey. Everybody played a ridiculous amount of Lord of Hatred because it was so good. Then we go into season 14 that realistically is just season 13 with a few different things, and that's basically it. It felt way too similar, which means everybody got burnt out much more quickly, even if there wasn't the acquisition issues with Mythics. And one of the original reasons I want to go over this and why I went over this in my previous recording of this video is because I want to go over the information that season 15 is right after BlizzCon. They're probably going to have a bunch of stuff at BlizzCon for season 15, and then we just now have it announced. So keep that in mind. So season 15 of Diablo 4, even though we know a bunch of stuff that's going to be in it, it seems like is going to be the biggest season we've ever had, because with the response from the community team, it seems that the stuff we have on the PTR for season 15 is actually only a smaller chunk of the overall season. So my theory right now is that season 15 will be the biggest season of Diablo 4 by far, not counting an expansion launch. Now that brings me to my predictions of BlizzCon 2026, because there is a bunch of information out there that BlizzCon 2026 is going to be the biggest BlizzCon in Blizzard's history, and that is seeming to be the case for all of their games. There's going to be some pretty massive reveals for World of Warcraft. They're going to be showing more on the Last Titan expansion, which is going to be a pretty massive step for the game in my opinion. There's most likely going to be the reveal of Classic Plus, which is going to be another massive reveal. There's probably going to be something pretty massive for Overwatch. There's probably going to be stuff for Hearthstone. I haven't really played Hearthstone in a long time, but there'll probably be stuff for that. And another pretty big thing that I'll probably make a video on for one of my other channels, there's seeming to be an open world StarCraft RPG shooter also being revealed at BlizzCon, because there's been more and more information coming out about this game, specifically coming out from journalists who have even seen some footage of it. And if you look at the key art for BlizzCon, it has a StarCraft character as one of the big 4 characters on it, alongside Warcraft character, a Diablo character, and an Overwatch character. So the return of StarCraft being this big RPG shooter, potentially a looter shooter, will be massive. Then we have the Diablo franchise that I think is going to have some massive reveals. First off, we have a Diablo 1 remaster. Diablo 2 was remastered. It was incredibly successful. It makes sense to go back and remaster and modernize Diablo 1. So a lot of people who haven't played it can go back and try out the original game. And that would probably be something that they wouldn't update. It would just be a remastering of Diablo 1 so people could go try it with all the modern amenities like modern controls, much more modern graphics and stuff like that. That would be pretty cool. Would help flesh out the Diablo franchise in general. There is a good possibility of new Diablo 2 stuff. A lot of people are wanting and theorizing a new act for Diablo 2 that would be pretty massive. It was pretty massive that when we got the kind of big reveal of the Warlock coming to 3 Diablo games, Diablo Immortal, Diablo 2, and Diablo 4, and I'm pretty sure they shadow dropped the Warlock into Diablo 2, and then they had that big update with it where there's a bunch of new quality of life, a bunch of new systems, new endgame bosses and stuff like that, which is a pretty massive update for Diablo 2, pretty much the biggest update that game has gotten since like it originally released back in the day with its expansions. So getting a new big expansion for Diablo 2 would be massive, would probably be pretty successful. I don't think there's going to be anything with Diablo 3, even though a lot of people like it and a good amount of people will still go back and play it for their new refreshes or essentially just going back through and getting re-releases of the seasons of Diablo 3. But because Diablo 3 is more similar to Diablo 4, Diablo 4 is taking a lot of the systems from Diablo 3 and making it in a new way that fits in Diablo 4. I don't think there's going to be much for Diablo 3 unless they do like a Diablo 3 remaster as well alongside Diablo 1. That's the most I could see. But then we get to what will obviously still be the star of the Diablo show. That's Diablo 4. Now, obviously, we have now gotten the reveal that a lot of Season 15 is going to be revealed at BlizzCon. There's a bunch of different things possible. As I went over in my previous video, they're adding this like mailbox. So there's a possibility or just a theory that they could be adding an auction house with that mailbox, or maybe they're adding something else crazy tied into this new Herodric post. But then there's a bunch of other stuff they could reveal for Diablo 4. So just to reiterate, the first thing is the rest of Season 15, which I think is going to have some pretty massive surprises. There may be some shadow drop of something massive. When I previously recorded this video, I even theorized that maybe they will be shadow dropping another class into Season 15, and the reason for that is because they are more than likely going to be revealing the next expansion, just not a lot about it. More than likely, if they reveal the next expansion, it will be the CG cinematic, it will be maybe some concept art, it'll be telling us probably like the continent or the region we're going to, and maybe the developers talk about kind of the lore and the art or something of that area, and that's basically it. They probably won't be telling us about any of the systems or any of the new content coming with that expansion, but if they do a similar thing to Lord of Hatred, maybe we're getting 2 classes with that expansion, and one will be shadow dropping in Season 15, and then we'll get the other one at the launch of the expansion like we did with Lord of Hatred. That's a possibility. Even though that would be much earlier than Lord of Hatred, that is still a possibility that could be pretty cool. So that could be one of the big surprises for Season 15. Then past that, I think there's a good chance they tell us about some new stuff with the coming year of 2027 of Diablo 4, and then probably also showing some stuff that's coming with the rest of 2026. This would be seasonal stuff. This would be new big systems that are really interesting. This would be new big overhauls. If there would be any big changes to, let's say, the reliquary system, they'd probably tell us about it there. Maybe there's some new big overhaul of cosmetics, or maybe there's some new really cool system coming in at some point. Like one big thing I thought would be really cool in Diablo 4 is adding kind of a mastery type customization to classes. It could be compared to something like Ascendancies from Path of Exile, but in my head, it would be more similar to hero talents from World of Warcraft, where you kind of have this separate set of additional talents that is much more themed and specialized around something specific. Like in World of Warcraft, you could play a warrior and you could play Mountain Thane for your hero talents, where now you're more about like thunder clapping and doing lightning damage and having all this cool stuff. You could play a priest where you're much more focused on like voidy type damage. Even if you're a disc healer, you could be much more about dealing damage with these void abilities and things like that. And having a system like that added into Diablo 4 would just add a ton of new customization. And the reason I think that would be cool would also be because that could be something they add into a season. And if I'm going real pie in the sky theory, They could add some crazy season like that that's tied to an expansion. So you have to pre-order the expansion, then you get these like hero talents or something added to the classes, and that could be like shadow dropped into a season or something. So there's a ton of different stuff they could do. There could just also be some massive new endgame content that'll be revealed at BlizzCon for season 15. So there's a ton of stuff, and it very much seems like they want to surprise us at BlizzCon, but also based upon some previous stuff we've gotten, I think they're going to want to shadow drop something really big to drum up a bunch of hype, because I think that's what they've learned with the past year of the Diablo franchise. Shadow dropping stuff works really well. They shadow dropped the Warlock into Diablo 2 with the big reveal that is coming to 3 Diablo games. They shadow dropped the Paladin into season 11. If you guys remember that was absolutely massive. So I think they're probably going to be doing something crazy like that for the rest of season 15 being revealed at BlizzCon. But those are my main theories at what is going to be shown at BlizzCon when it specifically comes to the Diablo franchise, and even more specifically when it comes to Diablo 4. Like I mentioned, I think with the reveals coming at BlizzCon for Season 15, I think Season 15 will be by far the biggest season we have seen so far, if you exclude the expansion releases as well. Because I think there's going to be something massive for Season 15. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.